Paul, my sense is that although South Africa as an African country has had its challenges, South Africa itself is a very well-functioning country. We have solid infrastructure, we have sound economic base, we've seen significant growth, and the ANC is going through its own transitions and natural tensions, which I think happen in the evolution of any democracy and any political party. I'm not a politician. I am very fortunate to work very closely with some very politically connected people and some very astute politicians and respected politicians. My sense has always been that the ANC is a very credible, established and respectable organization. I don't believe that they will do anything rash which would cripple the country. So I do have confidence in the government, evidenced by all the talk of nationalisation and how that was quashed. So I do think, and is being quashed, I do think that those elements will show the strength and credibility of the ANC. The recent strikes that happened in South Africa, transport strikes, were obviously a pity to a lot of people. There were many reasons behind it, and any big employer or mining sector, transport sector have to watch these elements. We are 1,000 kilometers south of where all of this happened, and I do think that is a distinct advantage. I think our unique political advantage is that this coalfield development exists within one of the poorest regions of South Africa, where there is as much as 98% poverty. For our first 60 jobs that we have now employed, we had 4,000 applicants for those jobs, which is very important, and the people are very important to us. So for us to be able to deliver on the job creation promises, for us to be able to make sure that the people in that region see an economic boost and are able to benefit from what the mine will deliver is very important to us. So the handling of our resources, the recruitment, the selection and retention of them is going to be a very important part of our business. Now, does that make us immune? Of course it doesn't make us immune. That people need jobs. We're very far away from everyone else, but I do think it offers protection. There's not the same conversation on the weekend as to incite one another that's going to spill over from one mine to the next. I think we have to, the politicians that we have working with us, the community leaders that we have working with us, very important. We're very grateful for our traditional leadership and the strong relationship we have with the traditional leadership, because the recruitment is being done in conjunction with them. These are their people that we're working with. And if we use that and build on that respect in terms of our community relations, which has always been important to us, we believe we can have a harmonious relationship going forward in terms of this mine. And that's going to be our goal, is to work well together. Paul, the fact that our coal is a low volatile coal means that if we wash it, which always sounds a strange term, washing coal, but basically beneficiate it to get rid of anything that's not coal, reduce the ash, which is basically your rock that doesn't burn, we are able to achieve a higher fixed carbon content, which is important for the anthracite market and has metallurgical value. By doing this, we do fetch a premium to the API4. It is an advantage. Currently, coal prices are depressed. A lot of people in the industry, a lot of analysts believe it's bottoming out now, and we're going to see it return. The impact on a number of suppliers, both in the US and globally, in terms of having to cut supply, is naturally going to have an impact on the demand needed and prices going forward. That's certainly our viewpoint. So, considering the forward curve on coal, if you look at the API4, which is of particular importance to us as a thermal benchmark for coal leaving South Africa at a particular heat value, the anthracite would trade at a premium, and usually a good premium, to the API4. Your coal that you sell against the API4 is entirely dependent on what you're selling. If you're selling the same heat value, you would negotiate very close to the API4. A slightly different heat value, you'd negotiate further down. What I can tell you, and our coal brokers, London commodity brokers, who've moved significant amount of tonnage over the past 7 years, they've been responsible for 350 million tons worth of broking coal, around 30% of coal from RBCT, they're directly involved in the broking of. And I know that the demand is still there. We work very closely with them. The demand is profound, and especially for coal that's a little off spec. That's not the premium 6,000 kcal coal, but that is 5,500, 5,000 kcal. We can achieve that spec very easily. So now being able to combine some sales in a year, and it would take us time to achieve a 50-50 split or 1-to-1, a vessel of anthracite and thermal, purely because we need to produce more raw coal, because more coal needs to go through the washing plant, because when you are achieving the higher anthracite spec, less comes out on the other side. We won't commence doing a vessel every month of anthracite, but if we did 3-4 vessels next year, fantastic. And we would then do thermal vessels every month. We weren't doing anthracite vessels. The idea would be to grow the number of anthracite vessels by growing our production, so we could eventually get to 1 anthracite vessel, 1 thermal vessel. It's very profitable for the company to achieve such a position, because the higher value anthracite at a premium to the API4 mixed with thermal, which is a slightly depressed, a more depressed price and might be slightly lower than the API4, marries the two together. But the third big advantage, and we've discussed this before, is that when you're washing the anthracite, say you had to put 100 tons of raw coal into the wash plant, in thermal, maybe you get between 40 and 60 out to meet that thermal spec. To meet the anthracite spec, maybe you only get 25 to 35 tons out. So say you had 70 tons left over, call it a discard from that plant. You would take that 70% discard, and it's not a discard, we call it middlings, and you would rewash that. And by rewashing that, you would achieve, again, 25, 30 tons, which would be able to meet a thermal spec. But the big advantage is that all the mining costs associated with that middlings product have already been absorbed in the anthracite cost and the production of the anthracite. So now you have a situation where your middlings becomes profitable, and blended with your raw coal, which is washed to achieve a thermal spec, you're suddenly able to protect yourself to a degree against falling commodity prices. Well, good you mention residue coal, Paul, because not only the residue, or now more correctly, discard coal from the rewash of the middlings, but also the discard from the wash of raw coal we feed in to meet a thermal spec. So, you'd have 2 discard coals or residue coals. We're going to stockpile that coal. You stockpile it, you'll compact it, but it's very accessible. And Paul, as we've spoken about, as I've said to investors, I know that there will be a power plant at that mine. We're saying we believe it would be there within 5 years. We've discussed previously, I don't want to digress, but just to mention the point, our national electricity generator, Eskom, by their own admission, lose 21% transmitting power down to the coast, unofficially, depending on who you speak to, it's a bigger number. There is so much reason to have power generation where we are. There is no power generation in the Eastern Cape. There is some nuclear power in the Western Cape, but all the power generation happens 1,000 kilometers south. So for a power plant to be there makes sense. Now the type of power plant we'd put in would have boilers known as circulating fluidized bed boilers, CFB. CFB boilers are more than capable of handling a wide range of coals and a very poor quality coal. So we would take our discard and either feed it in, the middlings would be adequate to feed in directly, and our raw coal adequate to feed in directly. So we would take of those 2 coals, feed them to the power station, and then blend bits of our discard in. And we'd eat away at that discard stockpile until there was none. And this would further aid the profitability of the company, and it's why we're pushing so hard to see a power plant get to the mine. Thank you, Paul. Very simply, to all our current shareholders, thank you for your support of S&R. As a management team, I can assure you of our dedication and determination to ensure that S&R succeeds. We'll be ramping up communications over the next few months, so you're going to see a lot more news flow come into the company. To prospective investors, please get aboard. I cannot see a better time than now to invest in S&R. Being in production and 2 months from our first vessel sailing, revenues is an absolute step change for us as a company. In addition, delivering cargoes on a monthly basis is going to allow us the opportunity to, through a proven track record in terms of delivery, negotiate substantial offtakes and investment for the company, a further transformational change. Not to mention, as I have before and repeatedly, our independent power plant that we're working hard on with the South African government and our Phase 5 Kucher opportunities. Both of these represent significant upside for the company. Being a part of SNR will give you the opportunity for a profound future, not only from a socio-economic perspective, but because this project can enable the development of an entire energy complex in South Africa where there is no such complex. It's the rejuvenation of export corridors which are in existence but not operating. So ideally, Paul, I'd like to welcome anyone not on this journey to join us on the journey, and those that are here, thanks for being a part of SNR.
This film is for educational and leisure purposes only. Proactive Investors does not provide investment advice. The company is a publisher and is registered and authorised by the Financial Services Authority. Please refer to the full terms and conditions on the Proactive Investors website.